Drupal Commerce future. If I can get this to go. Why won't it go to the next slide? My name is Matt Glahman. I am a senior Drupal consultant at Commerce Guys, a co-maintainer of Drupal Commerce, and also author of the Drupal 8 Development Cookbook. Before I go to the next slide, quick raise of hands, who uses Drupal Commerce right now? Right on. Who tried it, then got rid of it? Who's here evaluating? Like, you've heard of Drupal Commerce, you use Drupal, but you're not sure if it's your e-commerce choice. All right, so a few, good. It's always good to have a few evaluators in here. Who's never used it because they're on Shopify, Magento, Bleu, etc.? Okay, cool. So, for those who may not know about Drupal Commerce, even know this, Drupal Commerce powers tens of thousands of online stores and processes over 1.5 billion US dollars in annual transactions, and these stats are derived from Drupal.org and other partner statistics. And here we're going to be talking about decoupling Drupal's front end, but to me, Drupal Commerce has always been decoupled, but in a different way, where it acted as the web front end to a company's back-end services. You know, a company already has an ERP that handles products, order management, or they have a PIM and all of the product data and images are coming from some remote source, and Drupal Commerce is consuming them to build the website people give you money on. But here we're going to talk about decoupling Drupal's front end. And one example of all that is the Sport Obermeyer project, which was one of the first Drupal Commerce 2 sites. So this add to cart form, it's normal Drupal, but all this inventory data came from 40 different partners online, so we knew who bought it from the warehouse, how much they had in stock. So when you picked a product, so if you picked 2XL, there's actually like another vendor that would show up, and you could go offsite to buy the product. I said, we're here to decouple Drupal, not how it reads from remote data sources. So I kind of break this up into 4 different steps on what I'm going to cover. And why is decoupling important when it comes to e-commerce? This isn't just like a Drupal Commerce thing. Like, a lot of e-commerce systems have decoupled parts to it or are fully decoupled. Where were we in the beginning of 2018? Where we are now, and where we're going with our roadmap. So kind of a brief history of what's going on and some cool flashy things to show you. So why is it important? One thing, like we've all heard about, is it's fast and reactive. You get a quicker response time. The person is more engaged. Customers have an attention problem where they get easily distracted on a website. So the faster you can give them what they want, the more likely they are to give you a credit card and give you money, which means that your business stays in business. Decoupling also helps solve some hard Drupal problems that you can't really escape. And what kind of hard Drupal problems that come to performance? So one example with Drupal Commerce is once you create a cart, we need to know that you have a cart so it creates a session. Well, in Drupal, once you have a session, you lose caching. And this was really bad in Drupal 7 because then page cache just went out the window. With Drupal 8, it's not as bad. I actually have several Drupal Commerce sites in production that don't use the page cache module, only dynamic internal page cache. And that's enough to get it going. But decoupling allows us to kind of get around some of those and allow us to keep those layers of Drupal cache. And if you don't have those layers, when somebody goes to a product page, all of a sudden the server's getting hammered to render product data. And in Drupal, the most expensive part is its rendering engine. So if you miss cache and it has to go through all of that rendering process, that's eating CPU. So instead of taking people's money, you're using your resources to let them view your products. And then also there's form cache bloat that happens. This is a bigger problem in Drupal 7 and Drupal 8 not as much. But if you had a catalog with 30 add to cart forms, there's a form cache entry for each of those on every page load. And then if you have the product recommendations module on your product page, then all of a sudden here's more forms, and all of a sudden your database has this explosion of storage just for form cache. But again, that's more of a Drupal 7 problem and not as much in Drupal 8. But it's another reason why decoupling some of these things, avoiding the expensive parts of Drupal, is a benefit. We had a client where we first did some of this decoupling for. So decoupling the cart was a strategy for helping them to achieve large transaction data. For example, for Black Friday, I did load testing at about 9,000 users with 450 requests per second. Like, that was our benchmark, and we achieved that by decoupling the cart process. When we did that, instead of using cart sessions, we used cookies. We used the secure cookie data, and that let us know the cart information from a cookie instead of the normal Drupal session. We used JavaScript-based cart interactions to work with an API, and that meant that catalog pages and product pages were served by Varnish, or well, just even Drupal cache. So we never had to re-render products, we just had to worry about talking to the API to get a cart, and then when in checkout, take their money, make everybody happy. Because performance turns into more transactions, or conversions rather. And I don't have the statistics, but I know Mozilla has something on there that if for every second it takes to load, there's an exponential chance that they'll leave your site. So if your product page takes a long time to load, they're going to abandon. If you're at the cart process, like submitting something to the cart, takes a while to get the confirmation back. All these small things can lead to abandonment. And you don't want any slowdown until possibly the checkout when they're already committed to giving you money and going through with the process. So where were we in early 2018? We had no specific initiatives. We'd done it for a few clients. We knew it's something we should look into, and obviously Drupal was a buzz with decoupled and API first. Drupal Commerce is headless in the wild, like fully headless, which I'll cover next. And we kind of marked it as a platform goal. Like, we've always known. Ryan actually has a talk or a blog post from 2011 called Hyper Drupal, and this whole idea of a fully decoupled Drupal and Drupal Commerce. One case study to really highlight is Z Kung Fu. On it, it's called Running a $1 Billion Business on Drupal Commerce. It's like $700 million US. They're out of China, and they run their whole POS system using decoupled Drupal and Drupal Commerce as microservices. So they have like a PIM and and like a sales process and a few others that are different Drupal Commerce sites that communicate via JSON API and other backends to power an offline capable point of sale system. And this is before we necessarily try to do any effort to make it more easier to do this. And then I was given another example from Opium Works out of Cyprus. So this is actually an Angular component that allows you to configure sunglasses to purchase. So instead of having to use Drupal's form API and hope that you don't break Ajax, they're able to build this component that allows you to pick the different colors. And they have another one too where you swipe and they have like a CGI model of a person and you can see your glasses on a person. And when you click add to cart, it takes that data, posts it to an endpoint, and creates an order item in the cart for you. So by decoupling, you're able to build rich, robust experiences to serve these products. And then earlier in 2018, I went to Florida Drupal Camp, which kind of kicked off a spark and got this whole decouple train rolling. I learned about the JavaScript modernization initiative. I'd read some of the things going on with Vienna, but luckily at Florida Drupal Camp, Daniel, Sally, and Angie Byron were there talking about it, and it kind of put a bug in my ear that we could start taking advantage of some of these lessons that they're learning and working with the API First initiative. And I forgot when I do transmit, that's motivated to the couple train, and there's actually train emojis, but when I present, they don't show up, and that makes me sad. But that kind of kicked off the light bulb on how we could start providing an out-of-the-box solution to let people decouple instead of these bespoke one-off client things that were done for a website and then were kind of locked in and not reusable by our end users. So I decided on a cart API. A streamlined way to say I have this thing, I have this product, I want to add it to my cart without using the Drupal form API or any rendering in that area. And with a very limited scope to be light and nimble, I tried to use JSON API to start, but there was just a few roadblocks and some architectural differences. So we built some REST plugins, and we used the core REST module, so there's no extra third-party dependent, no additional contrib dependency, all powered by core. Allows you to add things to the cart. And that brings us to where we are now, so from April to today, and what we've kind of worked on. We have the cart flyout, which is I'll show a demo of that in part of our demo experience. A checkout API, which is experimental on GitHub and should not be used, but it was kind of me to learn the hard problems of a fully decoupled checkout. And kind of going back to the JSON API review, which I didn't get a chance to update that, but I did that at Decoupled Days in New York last month. So first, the cart flyout. So it's a progressively decoupled implementation. So for those who aren't familiar with like progressively decoupled or like a hard decoupling, progressively decoupled means that Drupal is serving your markup. There's still Drupalisms, there's still all the Drupal things, but JavaScript is taking over certain parts of the page and kind of offloading that from Drupal's rendering. And we did the cart flyout to mimic design patterns that we've seen in the wild, where you add something to the cart, you click your cart. Instead of going to a cart page, you get this flyout, this thing that comes out and shows you your cart summary. An example is from the Cartier site, which was built in 2011-ish, early 2000, some years ago. But recently, 1X Internet launched Orlo watches, and they implemented the same thing, but all of this is still powered by the Drupal block system, the Drupal form API, and normal renderings. So we decided to build it using rest.module, and we used backbone and underscore. One thing when talking with Boyan is we decided we didn't want to force somebody to now need to include React somehow to their website or then get yelled at for not using Vue or Angular or Hyper App, what other frameworks are out there. So we wanted to reuse core libraries so that way it just worked. You didn't need to go do some build process or anything else. Next, I have a demo going up. So this is part of our demo. So you go to the product, and this cart form is actually all in JavaScript, toggling, building out the attributes. This was rendered by Drupal. This was injected here. And then when I add to the cart, API call adds it to the cart, which then pops this to open. On blur, that went really fast, but on blur, it sends another call to update the cart quantity. And all these interactions are happening in the client and never touching Drupal's render system. On our demo sites, I got the performance to be about, it's a $10 DigitalOcean droplet. I think it was like 130 milliseconds was the product page. Once I put this on there, it became 60 milliseconds because it no longer had to render a form. And that's a huge improvement, right? That's double, that's half the time. So the pages are so much faster now because we don't have to be concerned about Drupal rendering a form or the cart block and all this extra data. We can just run an API call, do some JavaScripty things, and put it out there. And to kind of take that concept to the next level, I started to work on a checkout API that would allow a fully decoupled checkout where carts are actually stored in local storage. So that's the browser storage, not on the server. And a concept of this would be, let's say you have a mobile app or you just have a website and somebody's buying it on the train. And all of a sudden they go in a tunnel and they lose internet connectivity. They can continue adding things to their cart and you can just give them a notice that says, when you're back online, you can proceed to checkout. And that's kind of the use case for it, which as we enter these arenas of ambitious digital experiences, these are not uncommon problems that we're starting to experience. People want to have an e-commerce experience on their TV, on a kiosk, on other modes of transportation that might have periods of offline without connectivity. So next I have another video. I try to replicate our demo, and this is actually a Gatsby.js site built consuming JSON API data. So it automatically scaffolded a static website that can be fully cached into the browser and offline first. This is all built within JavaScript, just manipulating the local storage. And until I click Go to Checkout, that's the first time it talked to the server. It sent a summary data. So once I put in a promotion code, it sent another call to give me the new price update, which showed a discount. And then as I go through the checkout, this is all in React. And that's actually Braintree integrated to the React app. Still hasn't talked to Drupal except to get pricing updates. And then once I go through, you'll see the wonderful MVP order confirmation message. So I pass the order data with the Braintree token, and then boom. The endpoint actually created the order, did the full processing, completely decoupled. Now, this is in no way ready for like a full implementation. I ran into a lot of different kinks that we can work on to improve our backend API. So it's kind of like what the API First initiative did for Core, where they had to fix all the behind-the-scenes plumbing. There's a few things to do there, but that's the idea, is to push this forward so that way our end users have a strong API they can use to build these robust experiences that more and more customers are asking for. Your end users, the companies that are coming to you, the agencies, or actually companies that are building their own sites, are starting to get this because and the end customers there that are buying the products use things like Facebook every day, which have these kind of interactions. They're on these other sites. So we want to give tools that allow you to do these things in Drupal Commerce. So next I'll touch on JSON API. I know Dries talked about it in his Dries note that the React admin UI is using JSON API. It's kind of the new star of the API First initiative. It's going to be the first contrib module to go into core that's not experimental. Like it's just going to go right in there. It works great for retrieving individual products. Like in Gatsby.js, when I consumed JSON API and I got all the data, it put into its GraphQL stuff. Phenomenal. But it does not support this idea of like a mixed collection. And a collection is just, you say, give me all the products. When it comes to normal content, you say, give me all the news articles, give me all the blogs, give me a certain kind of thing. But if you tell JSON API, I would like all the products. I don't care if they're clothing products, books, any of that sort, just give me them. It kind of breaks down because it assumes these silos of data. So that's been one thing to try to reconcile. The admin UI initiative actually has the same problem for the node page because you have different types of nodes there. And same with Search API. So we are all trying to find a way to fix this. I haven't had a chance to update it, but I know one thing that I'm leaning towards is maybe we'll need GraphQL for catalogs, JSON API for raw data. Also, that way when you go build a site, you know the right way forward. And for those who aren't familiar with JSON API, it's very verbose. And here's an example, which can be a good thing or a bad thing. I had one product where I included all the variations and attributes, and it was 500 kilobytes of data. Again, great for Gatsby.js where you're building it locally, but on an actual live API, I don't know how I exactly feel about it. But if you were to build a static website, it is great because it is server verbose. I actually don't have it in here, but there's links to all the relationships, and it's very declarative. And again, I just kind of summed up the integration issues there. We try to at least use some of the serializers, which turns the data into JSON. So that way we could get kind of some of the same representation. Unfortunately, they're all internal, and if you try to use them, things break. So we kind of had to roll our own schema, basically, for like the cart API, because we weren't able to reuse any of the JSON API components, which live and learn. We're always looking at ways to adopt. I try to talk to Gabe and Wim and Matteo all the time and hop in the channels of like, but what about Drupal Commerce? But what about this? So where are we going on the decoupled roadmap? So as I said with the checkout, fully decoupled commerce is a bit away. I have a bucket list of things I need to work through since I was in New York that can improve what it would be like to be a fully decoupled Drupal commerce. But we do have a goal by the end of 2019 to have something. What that something is, TBD. So the next iteration would be like a fully decoupled UI or a progressively decoupled UI, like a progressively decoupled checkout. How can we enhance the checkout experience with more backbone and underscore components? It's a little rough because it's like going back in time 6 years to write JavaScript, but it is a way that you can intake enhancements without a build system or all this other weight. But I would love us to have a fully decoupled demo, like take our current store demos and have like a fully decoupled experience so you can see the differences and how you'd use them. Does every site need to have a fully decoupled Drupal Commerce instance? No, because then you're managing this, you have to manage your front end and your back end, and most sites don't need that. But if you do have if you're selling things online and you have a mobile app, or if you have other kiosks, that's where it's a great thing to have. Because, let's face it, we live in a world of multiple devices and multiple things. One dream that I would have is to be Headless. So that's hypermedia as the engine of application state. And what that means is that's what JSON API tries to do, where everything is declarative and has links. So when you get an API response, you don't need a hard code logic to say what the next step is. Your API response gives that example. And I wish I would have had time to link here, but Gabe actually gave a great talk about this at Decoupled Days. And essentially, let's say that we received our product from JSON API, and in its link section, it said actions, or something of that sort. And action said add to cart. So we know we can render the add to cart component because it's available. What if it was out of stock? The links would say, instead of having the add to cart action, would say add to wish list. So our API response could tell us how to build our UI without hard coding all these things like, is the inventory greater than 1 or greater than 0 or all this? It's just, no, the API told you what to do, which makes building your front end that much easier. And that's kind of the pipe dream for that, and goes, like I said, Ryan wrote the hyper Drupal thing, kind of relates to that whole process. Because in Drupal Commerce right now, you can configure your checkout, right? You can build however many pages you want, you can put panes in different areas and have a customized experience. But it'd be a pain if you had to go rebuild that again in React. So you configured stuff here, and then you had to build JavaScript here. I don't know how possible it is, but what if we could push schema about what you've configured for your front-end app to consume and kind of auto-scaffold your checkout and things like that. Again, taking all this data and structured data we have that allows you to build a very robust front-end without having to rethink the wheel every single time. Again, so React.js question mark. For the same reason the admin UI initiative picked React, the same reason I did too, because one, they did it, so I had sample code I could look at, and that's the hot new thing right now. So, like I said, insert other framework, Vue, Angular, HyperApp, Elm. You know, the idea would be that we build it, we pick one, we work with it, we find out the hard problems. If you don't want to use it, use your other tooling there, or maybe that gives us a chance to build like the Drupal Commerce components libraries of the different frameworks. But just because we pick something doesn't mean that's what you have to use. It's just we're working with the best tools available to start iterating. That's why we did backbone underscore. No external dependencies. All right, we want to try fully decoupled. We'll pick React because we can just get started and then kind of learn along the way. And it might turn, like I said, it might turn into where we have a library of components that can be used. So when you use Drupal Commerce and you build a decoupled front end, you don't need to build like an address widget. It's just get the Drupal Commerce Angular address widget, or however it works. We would end up almost having a whole new contrib ecosystem of just front end packages. So there's another one with JSON API. There's JSON RPC, which is a remote procedure call concept that follows the Headless ideas, where you just send a package of data and then it will come back and just say, yes, I did it, or no, I didn't. But it will give links about what actions are available if you ping a certain endpoint. I wish I would have known more about this when I did the cart API, because right now the cart API, to work with it, you need to go read my docs and then go build it. But what if you could hit an endpoint that said, okay, system, I'm ready to add something to the cart, and it said, here's your actions. You can add it to the cart, or maybe, you know, you modified it so it also gave like a wish list option. You have an order item, but you don't know what you can do with it. So you would ping the API and it says you can update it, you can delete it. Or it says, I have this cart, what can I do? And you can say you could empty it or go to checkout. And that's kind of where like the JSON RPC would come in, is that whole like declarative API. You don't need to hard code that logic. The API can instruct you on your next steps and what's available. And that would allow us to deprecate REST module and focus more on using that and kind of streamlining into this idea of like what is like a hyper API, hypermedia. And one reason we do care about JSON API is it's becoming the de facto. So I think one of the ideas that they're going to push is once JSON API hits core, they're going to try to deprecate the REST routes for entities. Like use REST for one-off endpoints, but if you want to consume entities, use JSON API. So obviously we need to keep track of this, because if that's where core is going, we need to make sure that we are up to date with that. And I already went through all of this. But that would allow us to just make the API more nimble and allow you to build a better front end to it. One thing that I would like to do is try to improve our back office, which for back office is managing products, managing orders. Because that's honestly where competitors can beat us, right? You know, somebody opens WordPress and they got a fancy dashboard, or they open Magento and it's like graphs everywhere and things are a little bit more robust, while Drupal's backend kind of hinders in what we can do. So it'd be nice to see if we can use some of this decoupled stuff like the admin UI initiative to build some more robust back office things. And the primary focus would be around order management and fulfillment, because that's usually a big pain point. And then I'd love to see what we could do for like product management. If you would like to try a demo of the progressively decoupled carts, we have demo.kickstart.com, and I'm going to see if real quick I can open it in here. So we have this, and this is it. You can go get our demo composer template, or just get commerce_demo, the project, and get this up and started. So if I were to go to men, and so here's the product right here. So this is all happening within the client, and how we're doing so is embedding all of the product data into JSON, and it's being consumed by Drupal settings. So that's how we're doing it, like progressively decoupled, right? If it was fully decoupled, we talk to some API endpoint, it'd give us the data, but it's actually just cached in the page. So, you know, this is cached forever until you edit the product, and the JavaScript will read it and scaffold out a add to cart form. When you click add to cart, this again is all happening in the client. So I'll do a quick demo here. So if I remove this from the cart, we make a call to delete, we get the new cart data back, and the JavaScript front end will update to it. If I decide to buy 10 bags on Blur, again, post the update, get the data back. And this is all available to play on at demo.kickstart.com. And we also have like braintree.commercekickstart.com, which allows you to test and play with like the Braintree module. And if you want to give this a try locally, you can use 3 commands to get it up and running. The 3-command thing was inspired from the precursor to the quick start command in core, like when it was first a patch. It's like, give me, and we put it into a thing. So if you go to github.com/drupalcommerce/demo-project, you can then run the composer create command, cd into it, run composer run preview. That does all the business. It runs a PHP built-in server, uses SQLite, and you get all that to play around with. And this can help you, 1, learn how to build a Drupal Commerce, 2, sell it to a client, which we've already had some people doing, and just see like, okay, the cart flyout is neat, your out-of-the-box implementation is okay. How can we then take that to build our own, which a few people have done. They've taken that as the boilerplate to build their own experience on top of. Which I would like to then say, if this is cool, if you're interested in Drupal Commerce, contributing, or you have general questions, come be a contributor tomorrow at the contribution area. They have all that stuff, but one thing that you can contribute to Drupal Commerce if you're interested, like we need documentation help, even feedback from end users, like for influence the roadmap, you know, we used it, but the client turned us down because of this, or we hit this roadblock in here. That kind of feedback is a huge contribution because we maintain it, but we can only hear what people tell us if it's not from a client. So getting feedback and all those things is a big help. And that's it. So we have time for questions. I'm going to kick this back to here in case anybody wants to get a hold of that. So questions?
I hear you talking about JSON API and JSON RPC, but I didn't hear anything about GraphQL. Are there any plans for that?
Sorry, which one?
For GraphQL.
GraphQL. So that's because I hadn't looked into it. So I had not looked into GraphQL at all because I kind of had I had these things I needed to work on. But after realizing that JSON API is not possible for a catalog, that's where my next step, and I've got it in my post Drupal Europe plan, is to investigate what it would be like to use GraphQL with the Search API module that just came out. And I think that's how we would need to build catalogs. So if somebody wanted to build a decoupled catalog in Drupal Commerce, due to having different bundles, you would need to use GraphQL. From what I've seen, I haven't looked at it yet, but I don't think there's any other way. So GraphQL would have to become part of the recipe of how to build a decoupled Drupal Commerce site. So it's on my roadmap of things to look into.
I want to ask a question about checkout API.
Yeah.
are you planning to do some form schema API or something like this? Because I can have like 10 panes with 10 panels and whatever. Like,
Yeah.
what's the plans there?
The plan is to figure out what the plan is. So when I went to here, we can get back over to here real quick. So when I started building this, I realized that there was a lot of pain points along the way. I ended up fighting Gatsby.js, and then I fought JSON API. Then I finally got the page built, then I got the checkout. Oh good, I had something in my cart already. So, okay, like even right here, redeeming a promotional code, we have it where if you attach an invalid coupon to an order and then it goes through the refresh process, we remove the coupon. So the only way you know a coupon didn't apply is if you submit and you got no coupons back on the order. But then, do you expose a coupon validation endpoint that then somebody could DDoS and find out all your valid coupons? You know, like, what do we do there? So like, that's even a hard question right there. Or how about validating email addresses and then address, shipping, smiley face to get shipping methods in there, because the shipping method selection breaks down if you have an unsaved order. So actually in this whole process, the order is never created or saved until you put in payment information. In this initial spec, that was a pipe dream. I don't think it can be like that. It would have to be one where you incrementally save the order as you get data. So I already have that iteration to do. Like this initial concept, I have to step back from where you go to checkout, it creates the order. You give an email, tell Drupal Commerce that I got the email, and then you can know the next steps. And hopefully, as we do that, that kind of gives way to this idea of the checkout flow itself, giving us the metadata on what panes you've configured, and hopefully transmitting that so you can build your front-end application around it. Because, does that help answer the question? Yeah, because like I'm thinking right now, all right, so how do I even get the checkout flow to tell me what panes are in there? Great, it tells me that I have a billing information pane, but what does that mean? So how would we then get the checkout panes to define this extra metadata? And is that something that we do in core, or do we have like an experimental module which supplements the data along the way? Yeah, those are things I'm considering, and as I built it, I realized there's a lot of hard problems to do, and it's a lot of baby steps. It's slowly going the way. I don't want to build like what Cilius has. So Cilius is the Symphony e-commerce framework, and when you do their checkout, they say you have to have billing, you have to have shipping, you have to have review and complete. 4 pages, nothing else. Like, well, that kind of stinks that your e-commerce application is telling you how your checkout has to work. I don't want that. I want it to respect the flexibility that we have, even though it's going to cause severe pain in roadmap and figuring it out. But that's why I think Drupal Commerce is a great fit, because of that flexibility. So all those things are taken into consideration as we try to figure out what this API could look like.
And one more question. I also investigated this Flyout and cart API, and I have a question: why in order item there is a hook for field access, and all the fields are like access forbidden, except for like 4 or like some basic fields? Because, for example, in my project we use some stuff that I populate order item with my own fields.
Yes. And that's when like I said, it was a very succinct implementation. So what we did do to kind of reduce the payload is we use hook field access to kind of remove things from being part of the API, which then you could go in and say, I want my custom field to be there. But that's the next step, is to support custom order item fields. And even displaying, like right now you can't, there you go. If you configured quantity and the order item form display to show up, it wouldn't right here. So there's a pitfall. But those are all things where start small and slowly grow big, because otherwise I probably would have never finished anything, because we have so many edge cases to take care of. But there's actually an issue created for it for the flyout, but then it's postponed on something in Cart API to support order item fields. But it's all things that are being considered. And one thing I've told people to do is just take our REST plugin as an example and make your own endpoint if need be. Somebody's doing that where they, just like the sunglass configurator, they don't actually need to have like 5 fields pre-filled. They need to actually just send a JSON blob to their ERP. Like, they don't need all this structured data. They literally just need to send this JSON blob to their backend service to configure the product. So they wrote a custom endpoint that passes it and stores it in an order item text field, and then that gets sent to their server. So they took the base implementation as an example and just kind of made their own. So that's one way to do it too. Or they may not have even made their own. They might have swapped out the class. I think they swapped the plugin class that did their thing. So they took the module, they just replaced the one piece they didn't like, which is why Drupal 8 and object-oriented programming is great. So try to go with a simple use case and ensure that people had a way to fit their needs while we kind of build out our helpers and all that. Any others? If not, then I think we can all go and get out early and get some dinner and a nap in before trivia. All right, thank you.